Hi, everyone. Welcome to this course. This is Julia Stewart, and this course is Introduction to Positive Psychology Coaching, and we're on class number 1. This is going to be about 30 minutes long, and there are 3 classes in this course, and they'll introduce you to aspects of positive psychology that are important for coaches to know. So if you're relatively new to positive psychology, this is for you. All right, so here are the 3 classes. Today is introduction, a little bit of a backstory. Next week, we'll talk about, well, not next week, next class, we'll talk about positive psychology coaching tools. These are the things you actually do during coaching sessions. And so if you've been coaching for a while, but you haven't studied much positive psychology, you might want to think about using some of these tools more intentionally in your coaching sessions to upgrade the outcomes. And then class number 3 will talk about assessments in positive psychology. And these are assessments that for the most part are free. I'll mention 1 or 2 that might come with a fee that you might be interested in. But these are also assessments that you don't have to have a lot of training for in order to start using them. So that makes it ideal for somebody who's fairly new to positive psychology. All right, so what is positive psychology coaching? It is a science-informed, customized conversation that empowers the client to grow and reach important goals or visions. And science-informed means it's a little bit different from evidence-based, which basically means everything you're doing is based on research. There's a lot of research into positive psychology and coaching, but it's we're not at the point where we can confidently say that everything that we might do in a coaching session has been well researched and we know the best ways to handle things and for different types of clients, et cetera, et cetera. At this point, we've got a lot of information, but we still need to use our intuition and empathy. And we're definitely customizing the conversation according to the client's values, their needs, their wants, etc. And I'll just share an opinion with you. I have a feeling a lot of coaches would agree with me on this, which is we will never be truly evidence-based. So positive psychology coaching will always be science-informed because the coach's intuition and experience and ability to relate to the client and give them what they need in the moment. You can't you can't be all that and be trying to follow the directions of 1,000 research studies. So we are science informed and we customize the conversation to each client and each session we do with the client. And we do it in a way that empowers the client. So we don't tell them what to do. We just help them find the tools or have the insights they need in order to reach their goals and visions. And there's growth in that process as well. So sometimes the reason a client hasn't reached a goal yet is because they need to grow into who they need to be in order to reach that goal. And there's also something called transcendence, which generally comes about by reaching our needs. And so helping our clients realize what their needs are, stop ignoring them, which is what a lot of people do, like, oh, I don't really need sleep. I can keep going for weeks on end, launching my business. That's an example of ignoring a need. People tend to crash, and I'm sure you know that. So we help them identify their needs, and everybody has a slightly different set of needs that really kind of stick out for them. And so we customize that as well. And when someone gets their needs met, they transcend their egos basically in a really impressive way. It's one of the reasons why coaching clients can achieve things that they would have a very hard time achieving without coaching. And then important goals or visions. The vision is the larger picture, and it's a good idea to help your clients start developing a vision for what they really want. It could be a vision for a year. So I'm doing this on January 1st, 2023. So this is a perfect time, this beginning of this month, to help clients develop a vision. And I hope you're doing that with your clients. And then important goals usually fit within the vision. Occasionally you'll get an outlier, something that becomes very important to the client temporarily, and so you can help them with those too. I like to call important goals heartfelt goals. So if it's just something they think they should do, and you probably already know this, they're probably going to have a hard time doing it. Some people are extremely disciplined and will make themselves do the should goals, but they tend to burn out or just be very unsatisfied with their results. So heartfelt goals are nice to focus on, especially if they fit into the vision. And another thing that can help a goal be easier to reach. Literally, it feels like the client is being pulled forward. A vision can help with this also, but connecting their goals with their core values can make a huge difference. So I've taken apart that definition for you. That's what it all means. And let's keep going. So why does coaching even need science? You know, when I started coaching, which was 22 years ago, nobody was talking about science. But as I learned more about the science, I realized, because I went to some really good schools, I lucked out and studied with Thomas Leonard, who had a lot of integrity, was really smart, and was one of the people who really launched coaching as a profession. Um, he probably was basing at least some of his ideas on science. So that's why I say coaching has always had science, but maybe coaches weren't talking about it. And if there's a criticism that I have of Thomas Leonard, it's that he borrowed ideas from a lot of different people, which is okay. You know, the standard idea of um, plagiarism is if you take somebody's ideas without making any changes of your own. And kind of the rule of thumb is you should have at least 3 sources, and then combine them in some way so that makes it new. Thomas wasn't plagiarizing, but in uh, the research fields, people are careful to cite the researchers who went before them, and to talk about the theories that they started out with to come up with whatever new ideas they have. And so that's important. So that's what I was going to say. If I was going to fault Thomas Leonard, it would be that he didn't always mention what his sources were. We try to be a little more, well, a lot more responsible about that now. Spirituality is also important, and coaching always seemed to have a lot of spirituality in it. And there was tremendous freedom in coaching. It wasn't trying to be approved of by the sciences, which was a good thing because there wasn't much research to base it on. But I think we more or less established that a client's spirituality can make a big difference in their coaching. And of course, some clients are atheists or agnostics, and they're not particularly interested in spirituality. Kind of a little backdoor into spirituality for a client like that would be to explore their values, which is a really secular way of looking at the bigger picture, what really matters to them. Um, but in today's world, spirituality is being accepted in psychology, and the International Positive Psychology Association, not to be confused with the IAPPC, which is the International Association of Positive Psychology Coaches. So that C on the end can help you keep them separate. I know some of our members are still struggling a little bit with that, and that's totally understandable. In any case, the IPPA actually has set aside an entire division for spirituality at this point. And this is January 2023. The Positive Psychology Book Club at IAPPC is launching this month, and the first book in it is The Awakened Brain by Lisa Miller, which is a very influential book right now. So if you are a member of IAPPC and you have access to the membership community, do sign up for the book club and get in on that and hear a little bit about how spirituality might be a great tool within your coaching if you haven't been using it. So coaching, in my opinion, is a profession at this point, but it is not thoroughly researched, at least not as much as some other professions. And it does need a research basis. So I'm continuing to do the old coaching where we don't know where these ideas came from, but the people training us say they really work. And spirituality, maybe we can use it, maybe we can't. It depends on the school of thought we're coming from. We need a research basis, and the research basis says, yes, science can help coaches coach more effectively. And yes, they can include spirituality, not trying to tell our clients what to believe, what their spiritual beliefs should be, but rather talking to the client about what their spiritual beliefs are and helping to work with that. And occasionally letting them know, a spiritual reframe that might be helpful. That can work as well. So what is it about positive psychology that goes with coaching? So it could be neuroscience, emotional intelligence, systems theory, any number of other fields. Why positive psychology? And there's one really big, really great reason, which is that positive psychology is basically an umbrella term. It includes a lot. In the early days of the positive psychology movement, basically the definition of positive psychology was that it was the study of people who were flourishing with an eye towards what other people might want to do to flourish as well. So if we know what flourishing people are already doing in their lives, then we have some possibilities for what to explore in our own lives. A little bit more is known about positive psychology and the various theories under it. So the definition may be evolving, but it includes research in neuroscience about how people can do well. So understanding things like the parasympathetic versus sympathetic nervous system. That helps us to coach much more effectively. And then there's emotional intelligence. That too can be thought of as part of positive psychology. So in emotional intelligence, it's important to recognize your own emotions and to be able to recognize emotions in others, and that includes negative emotions. So positive psychology is not just about the happy clappy stuff, as one of my teachers once said, but it's also about negative emotions, which can have a benefit for us. So a little bit of stress or anxiety, for instance, can help you to reach your goals. And then systems theory also fits under positive psychology. So if you've studied any of these, I wouldn't say that you've necessarily studied positive psychology, but you can begin to fit them under positive psychology ideas as well. So positive psychology is sometimes called the science of happiness, well-being, and flourishing. Pretty great. Coaches help clients become happier. We also help our clients become more successful, and we help clients to flourish. So positive psychology and coaching really kind of fit together. And underneath those are other theories that fit in when they are focused on what helps people to have better lives. Okay, so here are a couple of organizations in addition to IAPPC that can assist you in learning about positive psychology and applying it with your coaching. The other two organizations are not specifically about coaching. So I mentioned IPPA. I'm not sure, that may have been the first Positive Psychology Association. In any case, it is international. It was founded by Martin Seligman, who also is considered the father of positive psychology. And then there's the Greater Good Science Center. So it's kind of on the other coast. Um, and it's associated with University of California at Berkeley, and they have an awesome blog that I highly recommend that you start reading. You can also become a member of it for pretty inexpensive. And especially if you live in that area, they have live events you might want to attend. IPPA, you can join. It's not very expensive. And they have monthly webinars. They also have an annual conference that you might be interested in. Okay, let's keep going. Yeah, so according to IPPA, positive psychology has three main concerns. The first one is positive emotions. They can be increased, but they're fleeting. So we all love to feel good. And those moments where we're feeling particularly bad are really uncomfortable, but they can teach us, and they can also motivate us to learn and make changes. But positive emotions can be increased in a number of ways. We'll talk about Barbara Fredrickson's Broaden and Build theory, which deals with positive emotions. And then we'll also talk about some things that can um, help us to be more sustainably, I'm not going to say happy, but enjoying well-being more sustainably would be a good way to say it. Then the next is positive traits rather, which are more enduring, and they can be strengthened. And the traits that we deal with most often are strengths, specifically via character strengths are what we work with at IAPPC. And knowing your strengths, knowing how you use your strengths in your coaching, and learning to master your strengths within the activity of coaching can help you to be a terrific coach. Also, understanding the greater theory of character strengths and understanding how they can help your clients reach their goals are very important. So there are many positive traits. Character strengths are probably the most important. And when we go through life using our strengths to solve our problems and reach our goals, we tend to be happier. We tend to wear ourselves out less, so we have more energy for the activities. We have more fun. We may be more masterful and have better outcomes. It may go faster also. So your way of doing things is the way for you. I think for many years, people thought they should copy other people who were successful and try to use their formula to succeed. And now with strengths and the science behind them, we know that that's probably not the best way to do things, and we know what to do instead. And then there are positive institutions that can foster positive emotions and traits in the greater population. So schools are starting to teach positive psychology to their students. I met a woman who's a university professor, and she had a 6-year-old daughter, and she had a conversation with her daughter in which she didn't mention strengths, but her daughter answered back as somebody who had learned about strengths. She said, "You mean I need to learn to appreciate my strengths more and strengthen them so that I can do this better, Mom?" And so some of us as adults are just learning about strengths now. As you learn about them, you'll start to wonder, how might your life have been different if this theory had existed when you were a kid? All I can say is your life can be different now, and so can your clients. Um, and so positive institutions can also include IPPA or IAPPC, and we're helping people to live more positive lives and to have greater success in their lives. Okay, so I mentioned science and spirituality. And here I've got a question up: science or spirituality? This used to be really a question. So before positive psychology was recognizing that spirituality is really important as far as people's well-being goes, positive psychology was mostly a secular science. And some coaches definitely appreciate spirituality more than science. I'm very excited that we can use both. So spirituality, it offers meaning to us, a richness, a freedom of belief. It gets us out of our prefrontal cortex and executive functioning, which can solve problems or help us solve problems, but does not connect us to our feelings, which are what make things feel important. Spirituality can do that for us. And it also can help enhance people's well-being just by itself. And so if your client is spiritual, definitely use that to help them. And you could just ask them about their spiritual beliefs when you're coaching them. You know, coaches generally get permission to ask about quite a bit more than a person would in a social situation. Get the permission, but don't be afraid to ask. And you can introduce new spiritual concepts to open-minded clients. We never impose them on a client. And you want to be really careful because there are spiritual concepts uh, um, that can really get in the way for some clients. So some people teach the law of attraction in ways that actually don't work well and get in the way for clients. There are also lots of aphorisms out there that coaches sometimes bring out if a client is struggling with a difficult relationship, for instance. If someone was unkind to you, the coach might say something like, well, hurt people hurt people. And that's actually not quite true. It's true that some hurt people hurt people. It's also true that some hurt people don't hurt other people, and that some people who have not been hurt people. It's never okay to hurt people. And when we excuse hurtful behavior, we're actually enabling it a little bit. And we may be causing our client to feel guilty or cause them to take responsibility for the other person's behavior, which is never their responsibility. So be careful about some of the aphorisms you may have been taught either through spiritual beliefs or through some coaching schools. You don't want to make your clients feel ashamed ever. Okay, and then there's science. It offers evidence, rigor, and accuracy, all important things. So um, when I challenged that idea that hurt people, uh, that was based on a variety of research studies. So it's not true that people only hurt others when they're hurt. It just isn't. So having evidence, rigor, and accuracy helps us to coach much more effectively and avoid mistakes that earlier coaches might have made. It also keeps coaches honest. So um, with spirituality, you can claim almost anything because many liberal democracies protect spiritual beliefs. But science is actually designed to be in a situation where people have to prove what they're saying. And people will challenge you sometimes. So having research at your fingertips can be really helpful. And we're developing a research kind of repository, I suppose, so that our members have access to all of that. And coaching is based on the idea of growth and improvement, which uh, science is showing is a real thing. It used to be believed that people didn't really change once they became adults, but now we know that they can. Anyway, without science, coaching can become mediocre. So we're kind of launching uh, our coaching with possibilities because as more research comes out, we understand more about how various tools like spirituality can help our clients. So I studied with Tal Ben Shahar several years ago, and he always used some spirituality in his positive psychology teachings because he pointed out at the time that people who have a religious practice or a regular spiritual practice tend to show greater signs of well-being, such as better health, sometimes even longer life. And so this is just a simple tool that he shares with people called SPIRE, and it's an acronym for spiritual, physical, intellectual, relational, and emotional. And this particular item, you simply score yourself on a scale of 1 to 10 in each of these areas. You can do it at regular intervals, or you can do it a couple of times a day. Over time, you start to see patterns, and the patterns can help you to pinpoint if there is a problem where it might be starting. Um, so that's why I wanted to share that with you, and also just kind of a shout out because Tal was talking about spirituality before it became cool in positive psychology. All right, so I promised to talk a bit about Barbara Fredrickson's Broaden and Build theory. This is sometimes called her positivity theory because she wrote a popular book called Positivity about Broaden and Build. It's an approach to flourishing. And Broaden and Build basically means when people are coming from a more positive place, so they're experiencing more positive emotions, their perspectives tend to broaden and they notice more and they notice more good things in their lives. So they're able to build resources and relationships that help them to further build on their positivity. So it was a really exciting discovery that she made. I highly recommend that book. It's very readable. And there was some math in it. So there's math in everything. And basically, she found in her original Broaden and Build theory that 3 positive experiences or emotions or thoughts to 1 negative would lead to flourishing. So that's what the F means. It doesn't mean flunk, it means flourish. Um, and that is the tipping point of Broaden and Build. Since then, other theorists have found that the ratio may be different in different situations and perhaps different for different individuals. And that's fine in coaching because we're always customizing to our clients. But the basic rule of thumb is 3 to 1. And most people are not at that level. So the average person is around 2 to 1. And their lives are pretty good. They may not be as meaningful as they'd like. They may not be as joyous as they'd like. They're getting along. They're not flourishing, but they're not languishing. So that's probably about where many of your clients start out. There is also a 1-to-1 ratio, which is associated with languishing or being on the threshold of languishing. So that means not only are things not sustainable, but they may actually be getting worse. And the individual may be sinking into depression. So things get more difficult as time passes. There's also a higher level because Fredrickson asked a really important question. Is there an upper level to positivity? Can there be too much? And what she found was 11 to 1, positives to negatives, started to tip the scale in an unhealthy direction. So the person might be exhibiting signs of mania. They may not have bipolar disorder, but um, they might just be getting a little too excited a little too long. And when that happens, people tend to take bigger risks. They tend to become more egotistical and they make mistakes. And when they make mistakes, they fail. And that failure could tip them over into languishing. So that's kind of a description of how bipolar, which is also called um, manic depression, works. The person is manic for a while, they go too far, they have a failure, and they tip into depression, and it just goes back and forth. There are chemical imbalances going on there as well, but be careful about pushing too much positivity on your clients. I've seen this a lot over the years, particularly in areas like the law of attraction, where people learn to just be positive about everything. Just ignore all the negative or reframe all the negative things so that they're good things, and ignore problems that may be growing. And Other things that can happen is that people stop taking you seriously when you're positive about everything because it doesn't sound realistic to them. You get the idea. Okay, so 11 to 1 is a little too high. So our sweet spot is probably between 3 to 1 to 10 to 1. And you could sink down a little bit into the 2 to 1 level. Um, so coaching needs to be pretty positive. That's uh, the way I see it. And before I knew much about the science of coaching, I was doing a lot of mentor coaching and helping coaches prepare for certification. And I listened to so many coaching sessions. I've listened to thousands of sessions. And it always seems to happen when the coach gets too serious, the coaching doesn't go as well. The client doesn't think as resourcefully, and problems may start taking over the conversation. So be careful of that. You don't need to fake it, but you might want to work with your own positivity ratio. And I'll share with you a website that you can visit called positivityratio.com. This collects data for Fredrickson's lab. And I would say sign up for an account. They're not going to spam you. It's free. And take the positivity ratio test every day for 2 weeks. So just put it on your calendar. It takes 5 minutes to do it. And ideally, you do it at the end of your day and think about the day that went before. And it will ask you, like, how much did you feel joy? Or how much did you feel disgust? So there are a lot of different um, feelings that they basically explore, and then they come up with a ratio for you. And the way a ratio works, it's just very cool and very simple and easy to teach to your clients, is the bottom number represents the negatives. If that number is high, if you've got like a 2 or 3 on the bottom number, even if you have a high number on the top, the ratio may be actually pretty low because the bottom number divides the top number. So if somebody is getting a low ratio and they want to raise it, they can do it in one of two ways. They can look at the bottom number and look at the types of negative feelings that they're experiencing and how they might be able to reduce those in their regular day in, day out. So I used to make a joke that this is a good argument for keeping your cat's litter box clean because it's disgusting. So don't let it get disgusting because it might lower your positivity ratio. But the number on top also could be increased. So look at how much joy do you feel? If it's not much, maybe you want to go out of your way to experience joy more often. Awe is another feeling that you might want to experience. Gratitude as well. And so you've got two numbers to work with. One is the positive that you want to increase. One is the negative that you want to decrease. If you have that rare client whose positivity ratio is way over 10 to 1, um, look at how their life is going. If their life is going very well, they may be okay, because this number can vary from person to person, or this ratio can. But if they're struggling in their life, like things just, they're trying to manifest, but they're just not successful at it, they might want to decrease some of their positives or even increase some negatives. Stop ignoring them. Stop pretending the stinky cat box is okay. It's not. And come down to earth a little bit. So positivity ratio, really powerful tool, easy to use in your coaching. Yeah, and I just want to mention ratios and how they show up in other research areas. So the Gottmans, you've probably heard of them. John Gottman is the more famous of the two. And they research marriage. What works in a marriage or in a love relationship and what does not. And they have become quite accurate at predicting which marriages will last and which won't. Shockingly accurate, in fact. So they've really learned what works and what doesn't. Early on, they said they were seeing positivity ratios of 5 to 6 to 1 in good marriages. But later they said they were seeing some extraordinarily good marriages that were actually showing 20 to 1 in favor of positivity. So that's showing you how the Broaden and Build positivity ratio might vary in different situations. So in a marriage relationship, it might be very, very high in the best relationships. And then the Prochaskas, they are known for the trans-theoretical model, but the aspect of that model that is best known are called the stages of change. They're not the only people who came up with stages of change, but theirs is pretty influential. And they have 3 stages of change before the person actually starts making the change. And that's kind of groundbreaking. So there's pre-contemplation, which means the person's not even thinking about changing. Then there's contemplation, which means they're thinking about it, but they aren't ready to do anything. Then there's preparation, which means they've thought about it, they've decided to do it, and they're taking some steps to get themselves ready to change. So an example I give of this is if this is a great, great analogy for this time of year, somebody's thinking about joining a gym and getting fit. The preparations stage might be that they go to 2 or 3 gyms in their area and take a tour and decide which one they like best. So they're not necessarily working out yet, but they're in preparation. And then the active stage is when they actually start working out. So they may have gone through a lot in those stages, and that's really important. Never coach somebody to change if they're in pre-contemplation. Don't try to talk somebody into thinking they need to change something. That's not your job as a coach. And then if somebody is contemplating changing, but they're not ready, don't be fooled by that. They may be talking about it a lot, but they may not be ready. So they might be using words like maybe or I hope. So they're a little vague. They're not sure they can do it. What you can do is help them move into the preparation stage. So, so what would help you to be more confident about getting started with the gym, if that's what they're contemplating? And that's a question that you could ask. And so one possibility might be to visit a couple of gyms and see what they're like. Some people are intimidated by gyms. Find the one that feels comfortable to them, where they don't feel judged. So that's an example of helping somebody move from preparation, from contemplation to preparation. But if they're in contemplation and you're trying to get them started working out, you're probably going to be frustrated. And so in terms of ratios, what the Prochaskas found was that we need to raise people's positive reasons for doing things uh, um, at twice the rate of lowering their reasons not to do them. So reasons not to do them: I've never belonged to a gym before. I don't really like exercise. I'm afraid everybody will have a perfect body and I don't. And so those are reasons that are holding them back. Trying to talk them out of believing that is not very effective, but helping them to find some comfort. Find the gym where they do feel good. There are gyms that are built for that. Help them make a plan to visit a few gyms, or ask a friend about where they go and where they feel comfortable if the friend is similar to them. So that's what works. Trying to talk our clients into things is a disaster. And if you've been coaching a while, I'm sure you know that. All right, so let's talk a little bit about Martin Seligman's theories. So he is considered the father of positive psychology. And he wrote a groundbreaking book called Authentic Happiness that came out, about 20 years ago. And in it, he found 3 pillars that he felt were part of authentic happiness. And these will look a little bit familiar to you when you think about what the IPPA said were main concerns of positive psychology. So we start with positive emotions, and those again are fleeting, but they feel good. And there are ways to increase the number of positive emotions we have. So for me, I'm a person who needs lots of sunlight. I get seasonal affective disorder if I don't get enough. So I keep the window shades wide open on sunny days. That helps me to experience more positive emotions. It's easy to do, and because I know myself, I can do that. When it's cloudy outside, I can turn on a light box on my desk, which is almost as bright as the sun. And I keep a lot of lights on in my house as well. And that artificial brightness helps me to feel a little better. Sometimes if the gloominess is really bugging me, I close my shades because I don't even want to see it. But all of that helps me with more positive emotions and fewer negative emotions. Seligman called this the pleasant life. And he said one of the major problems with this is that if people are just chasing after positive emotions, they get stuck on what he calls the hedonic treadmill. So I used to have a pet mouse that he was on his treadmill morning, noon, and night, it seemed like, and he never went anywhere, of course, but he got his exercise that way. And so a hedonic treadmill means you're trying to have better experiences, a more pleasant life, and you're chasing it. And when you chase it, you actually start to feel some more negative emotions: frustration because you don't always reach it, disappointment because you were hoping you would. And so just pursuing positive emotions can have the opposite impact. People actually become less happy. That's also one of the challenges of the law of attraction. I don't mean to beat up the law of attraction, but it's something that often gets compared to positive psychology. Like, aren't they both about positive thinking? And really, they're totally different. But yeah, with the law of attraction, if you are not reaching your goals, you may become increasingly dissatisfied with your life. And so that's a downside. Then there's the engaged life. And the engaged life is when you're using your strengths in challenging ways. And when we do that, we tend to go into flow. And there's another psychologist, unfortunately, he passed away not too long ago. He has a challenging name to pronounce if you're an English speaker. It's Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. And so that's a little mnemonic. The last name looks quite long. It begins with a C. If you just say the words "chick sent me hi," you'll get it correct. I had a European speaker who heard me say that. She said, "I can't believe you pronounced that correctly." I said, "Well, I cheated a little bit." Anyway, Csikszentmihalyi is most associated with the theory of flow, and he's written eloquently about it. And flow is when we become so engrossed in what we're doing that we lose track of time and we even kind of forget ourselves. So you might work all day long and forget to eat lunch. I hear stories about that all the time with coaches who are just getting started. Or you might make it all the way to dinner and realize you're still in your pajamas. So those can be downsides of being in flow, but there are a lot of upsides also. When people go into flow, they're experiencing a kind of pleasure that's difficult to talk about because it doesn't get stored in our short-term memory, or not in our long-term memory anyway. So we are doing things that we're good at. We're using our procedural memory, which is not as conscious. We just do it. So if you can type really fast, or if you can play piano really well, you're not telling each finger what to do. They already know what to do. And it's kind of a crazy feeling when you're doing it really well and you think, oh, I don't know how I'm doing this. But in any case, when you're using procedural um, memory, you are usually engrossed in what you're doing, particularly if you're doing something challenging. So if you're a pianist and you're learning to play a piece of classical music that is still a challenge for you, that may help you to go into flow much more so than if you played Happy Birthday at a child's birthday party. And so flow is a good feeling, and it helps us to do what we do best. And the more we get to do what we do best, usually the happier we are. We experience more positive emotions and fewer negative emotions. So our positivity ratio goes up. So the engaged life is more sustainable than the pleasant life. And then there's the meaningful life. This is the most sustainable of all. Seligman associates it with service. You can also associate it with your values. So whatever is most meaningful to you in life, doing that is going to give you a heartfelt sense of um, joy, fulfillment, and it is quite sustainable. So even if you're not happy every minute, so you might have some really challenging days, if you're working on what is meaningful to you, um, you feel satisfied with your life. So that's the happiness theory, but Seligman realized he left some things out. So years went by, he did research, he discovered that maybe happiness theory wasn't uh, all it needed to be. So he came up with his Perma theory, and Perma is another acronym for positivity, engagement, relationships, meaning, and achievement. So you can see that positive emotions, engagement, and meaning are in there. He added relationships because positive relationships or harmonious relationships, however you want to call them, um, uh, contribute more to our happiness than any other individual element. So relationships matter a lot. And then people, perhaps not all people, but maybe. I'm not sure about this. I'm research can tell us, but many people are happier when they're achieving more, maybe because that's a way to build their engagement. So the more you're reaching to grow as a person or achieve your goals, usually the more well-being you experience. And that's the real goal of PERMA. It's not just happiness, which is mostly associated with positive emotions. It's about well-being, which is a larger construct that refers not only to feeling good, but to having good health, having good emotional health or mental health, having harmonious relationships, etc. So it's a bigger picture look. And you can read about that in his book, Flourish. Okay, so in the early days of positive psychology, Seligman and some of his colleagues, notably Chris Peterson, they made up a team, and they were really starting out with some of the ideas that Greek philosophers had put forth, like, what does it mean to live a good life? Or what does it mean to be a good person? And so they first tackled this, what does it mean to be a good person, by looking for virtues that have been appreciated in almost every culture throughout history. Obviously, they couldn't study every single culture throughout history because some of them um, are, uh, uh, we simply don't have enough information about them yet. But they reached out beyond their little group. And when Seligman writes about this, he admits they are highly educated Western white males. And their point of view is going to be different from many other people's. So they reached out, being academics, they mostly reached out to their colleagues in other fields such as archaeology or anthropology. And found out what were the virtues that were appreciated by other cultures. And they sifted that down and came up with 6, which are wisdom, which includes knowledge and the acquiring knowledge. Then there's courage and bravery. Then there's humanity, so that would include humility and service. Justice, which is about fairness. Temperance, which is about being able to, I don't want to use the word control, but being able to follow your own goals for your own behavior about eating, drinking, sleeping, but also how you behave amongst others. And then there's transcendence, which gets a little bit on the spiritual channel. So once they came up with these 6 universal virtues, they started talking about what behaviors went with each one of them. And by studying those behaviors, they came up with character strengths. So they're character strengths because they are strengths that are associated with good character being associated with virtue. And just to be very clear, virtues are what we admire in other people. So we might admire the courage of a firefighter, or uh, we might admire the wisdom of an older person that we know. Um, and people sometimes get confused about the difference between virtues and values. Values are what matter to us individually. So they matter to us. It's not about what other people see in us. Other people might see our virtues, but we experience our values. And everybody has a slightly different set of values, and it's important to identify what yours are. But let's move on and talk about strengths. So these are known as VIA character strengths. VIA used to stand for values in action, but now it's more closely associated with the word, which in Italian, and I believe Latin, I don't speak Latin, via means way. It can also mean road, but it's actually, you know, the way you get to where you want to go. So, oh, this slide is a little bit messed up. I apologize for that. So the first 11 are in the second set, and they're a little bit smaller than the first, which is the last set. Anyway, I was talking about VIA, and so they're known as VIA character strengths because these are the ways that we demonstrate virtues. So you can read these on the screen. I'm not going to read them all to you. And I just want to say that they sometimes have different names. So the names have evolved, and they also have kind of collected. So if you've read any of the books on character strengths, you know that these are often associated with multiple words. So prudence, for instance, which is part of the virtue temperance, it's associated also with discretion or caution. And You can see others up here that have multiple words related to them. Um, So there is a survey that you can take for free if you haven't already. It's at the Via Character Institute. I'll share the URL with you in a few minutes. Uh, Definitely find out, what are your signature strengths? Signature strengths are the top 5 that you score on with the survey. And all of the strengths are strengths. None of them are weaknesses. Some of them are more developed than others, and they will tend to cluster at the top of your results. And the ones that are less developed, as long as you don't really need them, are not weaknesses. But if something changes in your life where you need to use something more than you have previously, um, then it might show up as a weakness because it's holding you back. So I'm not going to go into the entire theory behind character strengths. I just want to introduce it to you because that's what this class is about. But I also want to encourage you, if you have not already learned your signature strengths and learned how you best use them in your coaching, it's time to start doing that, especially if you want the IAPPC certification, the Certified Positive Psychology Coach certification, because we use your character strengths. So getting to know them and mastering them in the activity of coaching is really important. So we use strengths instead of competencies in our coaching. Okay, so here's an exercise, and you could do this exercise and share your results in the welcome area of our network community. That would be awesome. And here's how you do it. You're going to sit down and actually write a positive introduction to yourself, but it's yourself at your very best. So you want to pick a moment in time when you were at your very best. And you want to write about it for about 300 words. So it's like a medium-sized paragraph. And it can be helpful if you write it like a story. So a beginning, middle, and an end. And try not to make it about a hypothetical time, like I'm at my best when blah, 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 but rather a time when I was at my best was when I was in graduate school, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so describe what happened. And sum it all up with a positive observation about your strengths, because in fact, your positive introduction to yourself will almost certainly be describing some of your signature strengths that you used at that time to be your very best. There may also be some values sprinkled in there. So share that with a positive introduction. Oh, it says share it in your wins on this slide. You could do it there, share your wins, or in the welcome section, whichever you prefer. So that's just an exercise to do for yourself. And what I've found is that when people share their positive introductions, they are far more engaging than the usual introductions that we've all learned to make of, my name is Julia Stewart. I live in St. Louis, Missouri. I have 2 dogs and a cat. I love nature, blah, blah. When you share when you were at your very best, people get to know you in a way that often touches their hearts, and they remember you more. So this is a wonderful tool that you can use with your clients. You might ask them to do this for you. And you can also introduce yourself to your clients this way. Okay, so we're at the end, and to further your learning, in addition to your positive introduction, go to positivityratio.com and track your positivity for 14 days. And if you want to share that on the network community, that's awesome too. And then to learn more about your character strengths, go to viacharacter.org. This one is also free. And Find out what are your top character strengths. If you've done it, but it's been a few years since you've done it, you can do it another time. And they do a nice job of presenting your strengths. So you'll find out which virtues you might be expressing more than others. So you've made it through this first class. Congratulations. Thanks for being here, and goodbye.